Dear guests, dear ministries, it's a pleasure to be here. My journey with open source was a bit confusing. We, as a research institute in Luxembourg, obviously we use open source. When I arrived several years ago at SnT as a tech transfer officer, one of the first cases to deal with was to deliver certain software research results to a partner. What happened is that most of that results were open source. So, on one hand, great, yeah, we fulfill our mission, which is dissemination of academic results, right? However, not everybody was happy, and that was a bit of confusing. And when I digged into the case, I found out that the partner who heavily invested in that joint research actually was not super happy about the GPL licenses within the software stack we delivered. They said that absolutely doesn't work with our business model. That's not the fitting, the market fitting Kevin was talking about now, that we want to achieve. So, in the end, the partnership is continued. It was a little bit of better. What it meant for us is that we basically lost a funder to continue research. On one hand, where the confusion lays is, we did open source, but no one was there to ask a question how we should do that. That conclusion of the story, the moral of the story is that for us, nothing here is black and white, except for the slides, right? So, for those who don't know, thank you, Paula. The SnT is an ICT research center at the University of Luxembourg, founded in 2009. We, as a researchers, we do science, right? We aim on having excellence. We strive to have excellent publications. We are heavily cited. We arrive in top 10 venues in several fields in ICT. On the other hand, one of the foundation commitments of the SnT and founding director Björn Ottensen was market relevance. Let's do science. Let's keep the academic freedom, but under one condition: it has to have an impact on the market. It has to be transferable into products and services. And that's a core the DNA of the SnT, scientific excellence and market relevance. What does it mean in practice? We have long-term collaborative research projects with industries. It's impact driven, so it's a company that comes with a technical challenge, and we try to address that with science. Very important also locally. We tend to avoid stuff that has no concrete impact for the economy here in Luxembourg. So we basically operate in 4 areas. FinTech, obviously, such at the beginning explained, 8% is now in services of the Luxembourg wealth. Space system, huge aspirations. The cybersecurity, it's a hot topic on the agenda. Autonomous systems, IoT. In those 4 areas, we try to create that impact. Now, what does it mean for us? That journey of open source at SnT now takes about 4, close to 5 years. What we did realize, what I wanted to show with you today is 3 lessons that we've learned. So first of all is the context. And I know this may sound like a kind of contradictory voice around this audience of open source enthusiasts. But I hope I will not leave you more confused than I was at the beginning of my journey. So this is what we do at SnT. First, there are three pillars of our operations. First is the partnership program, which I mentioned. So we do collaborate with companies a lot. That's our core business. We do IP valorization. We do licensing of IP to existing companies. We also we have a venture program to create spin-offs, and of course talents. 60% of our alumni ends up working in industry. Someone comes here for PhD, but this is just a step not in the academic career. This is just a step in the professional journey. So if we can help people get smarter, we can educate them. That's also a win for the economy. But the context, very important, is to realize where do we operate. We're not a software house. We're also not doing too much of fundamental research. We operate in the middle of the TRL scale, so technology readiness level, for those who are familiar with this. So we do prototypes, we do demonstrations of new technologies, and we hand it over to the partners to do full integrations, to do a proper implementation of those results in their businesses. They know how their business operate. We can demonstrate what are the scientific advantages to resolve their learning issues. That also places us in a certain place where we're not directly exposed to the end users. There is always a proxy of an integrator or a company who has brought us this technical challenge. It has an impact on our licensing. So we do reserve certain level of flexibility in choosing the right licenses. Again, what Kevin said before, it's all about doing it right and choosing the right license in the right time. And again, part of that confusion at the beginning was we don't know what right means. We don't know what right means for SnT or for the researchers. And we found out that there are maybe some conflict in interests around. There are funders, there are academics, there are companies, there are open source companies, and it's sometimes difficult to manage the maze of those different, sometimes conflicting interests. So lesson number 2 was about setting the boundaries. What do we need? So first step in that journey was to assess the problem. And believe me, it takes a courage to admit nothing is perfect. And we tend to do mistakes and not to do the right things. For example, one first attempt in that process was to stop polluting internet, GitHub, with software that we publish without copyright notices, licenses, something that you can consult the code. It has functionally or technically speaking is correct. Legally speaking, I mean, you can't use that. So let's be a little bit more compliant. Now, where? Of course, the first attempt in learning is that we want to scope how big the problem is. And at SnT, we have close to 500 researchers. Not all of them, they are trained software engineers, but all of them, they do coding. It means that they don't necessarily bring or have that competence in organizing the software development cycles. They're not super knowledgeable, different licenses and nitty-gritties of open source, and we need to help them out. We need to educate. And when is also a matter, because the amount of publications and software releases now passes around 600 a year. And that's just scientific publications, not to mention all the results coming from over 160 projects with industries that we have currently. So we start with policy. We start with the definition why we're doing this, and I'll get to the policy at the end. And we start with the process. Who is the beneficiary of that policy and the process? And we have researchers and we have partners. There are two different personas in the equation here. You may also translate that to developers and users, or vendors and customers. In academia here, we have researchers and partners. Lesson number 3, challenges, culture change. I could speak a lot about the issue here with raising awareness. So there are lots of misconceptions about open source and the use in not just in academia, but in business in general. And we observe there are 2 approaches, mostly, and I think commonly represented here is that we are all pro open source. We should foster open source. On the other hand, there are people who are not super knowledgeable, that they get scared when they hear open source. I don't want that because, well, it will ruin my business, or it's not really aligned with my model or my VCs. They don't like that, right? And raising awareness, having that discussion about what it is and what it means, is the first part of that, our activity. Regular trainings, really to get to the first attempt of not making everyone an expert in open source, but giving a basics to being able to identify what's the difference between permissive and copyleft licenses. And believe me, there are people who do code and they still don't know. Third element is to recognize if someone does something good, they put up proper copyright notice, proper licensing information in their public repository. We want to give it a highlight and give it a thumbs up. Finding champions, it's difficult because, academia, we play a lot with ego, frankly speaking. So there are very senior researchers and professors doing software engineering, and you don't tell them how to do open source, right? So finding the right motivation to them and admitting, maybe this is not always correct. It's also challenging. So finding some champions, some enthusiasts that they do see an added value of the support that we provide is key. Next, communication. Finding the right language. To convince a senior professor that he's still doing some mistakes, and I can point to his repository, they don't have a license. Again, it takes courage and takes time. And what I personally prefer is to speak carrots and not sticks. So I can always say, you're not compliant, so you're not supposed to publish that. You don't have a license, you have unresolved licensing conflicts, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, or our policy or the copyright law says you have to do this and that. That doesn't work. Definitely not in the research world. But if you find a few sweet spots, like if you apply my suggestions here, you add a right license, you put a proper copyright information, proper notice, proper README file to your stuff, your publication will not be immediately rejected. And guess what? After some time, we said those properly prepared artifacts, they got higher level of citations. So this is the value for the researchers. Yeah, I got my paper, got an award. And one of the maybe not funding ingredients here, but one of the success ingredients was that the artifact, the software part was done correctly, was done the right way. Communication is also about how you present yourself internally. So we have a single point of contact for all the internal inquiries, whatever question they might have. Okay, am I okay with this license? I have this type of project, is it okay? We are there is always SnT.FOSS email address, whomever is there on the other side. After years, people will change. There's always the same easy, accessible point of contact. That also works for external inquiries. We have some requests about companies. If we went, for example, with dual licensing, asking for commercial license, it's very simple to find us there. And third element here, third lesson, is the balance. We found out about a year ago that amount of publications and simple checks that we're doing, that there are simple libraries or simple like tools, not really advanced, huge open source project. It's about 90% of the cases that we're reviewing, and it takes a lot of time. And for a very small office, roughly 4 people are operating in the FOSS team, as we call ourselves. That was kind of an overkill with very little added value for the impact with researchers. So we are still doing an exercise to see where it makes sense and where are the things that can be self-managed or sustainably done by the developers with a certain amount of training, and where are the projects and the releases where we actually need to step in and be a little bit more careful. Assessing the risk is here fundamental. We have different projects and different schemes. We need to follow certain rules. We have goals, for example, in dual-use military defense field, where bluntly using copyleft may create a very dangerous situation for you. On one hand, you are forced to open source something. On the other hand, any of your release is subject of Ministry of Defense validation or your funder validations. And there are different types of schemes that we need to follow to respect the IP conditions there. And balancing the workload, again, this is what we've learned. We don't have to review 600 releases a year. We would be happy to do 50, those very relevant, where we create the most impact. So out of that experience comes a revised mission of the SnT FOSS team, which is we support the proper use and deployment of open source across all the research activities to ensure highest technical and legal quality of software assets. And why? To enable better impact and with valorization and dissemination of scientific results. And for us, FOSS is not a goal in itself. It's not a strategy itself. We do not force anyone to go open or to go close. But we only say, when you do that, do this the right way. Is a tool for us to implement the SnT strategy of, again, using the scientific excellence and create with market relevance. So I hope this is not a too conflicting voice here, too confusing. We kindly invite you to hear more about how we do things at our workshop at 3 o'clock, I guess, on the Oslo track. Thank you so much.